What's up and welcome back to Interpreting the Scares. That's right, we're continuing on with our daily journey through the nightmares with the third film in the Exorcist franchise of films called The Exorcist 3. Set 15 years after the events of the first film, a detective is investigating a number of serial killings around town that mirror that of the Gemini killer, somebody who was put to death several years ago. But the one man claiming responsibility is currently behind lock and key, so how can that be? One thing's for certain, he looks a lot like Father Karras, who died in the first movie. I was really wary of watching this film after the second one, which, from my understanding, is often considered one of the worst, if not the worst, horror sequels of all time. That thing was, I don't even know, but when I heard that the same guy that wrote the book and the screenplay of the first film did the same with the third, as well as directed it, I was much more at ease because there's a beautiful nuance with the way that both the third and the first are written. Both movies are very, very focused on characters, their performances, and especially their dialogue. Some of the monologues in this movie are insanely good, poetic even. And while I was initially unsure of the plot direction, I really got into it pretty quick when I found out just how layered and deep it gets. The Exorcist 3 has also been called a masterpiece by several critics, knowing that when it first came out, it only received mixed reviews, but upon retrospective look, it's hard not to see how incredibly well constructed it is. You're talking about a murder mystery, a paranormal whodunit, where you know something's definitely off, but you can't quite put your finger on it. That maybe this one guy really is possessed by the serial killer of the past, but if so, he's inhabiting a physical body that can't leave his imprisoned room, so how are all these atrocities being committed? I love how mysterious it was, as well as the answer to that question. Not only that, but this film doesn't really give you much exposition, nor does it really treat you like a child, so you have to be paying very close attention to fully understand what's even going on. Also, this movie does not shy away from frightening imagery. There's some stuff going on in this movie that I would expect to see out of a current modern horror film, not from 1990. I typically say 90s horror is more cheese than it is great, but this was more of the latter. It felt really well put together. The visuals and cinematography often rivaled that of the first, although I would still say the first takes the cake on makeup work. Casting in the film is pretty cool. Most of the people here, to me, are unknowns, other than the guy that plays the serial killer, which is Brad Dourif, the guy that voices Chucky, right? Yeah, I gotta say I much prefer him here, as I never took him seriously as a doll, but in this in-the-flesh, maniacal man that loves to rip people apart, he's scary. He really is. The moment where he says,
"A decapitated head can continue to see for approximately 20 seconds. So when I have one that's cocking, I always hold it up so that it can see its body. It's a little extra I throw in for no added charge."
I must admit it makes me chuckle every time. Life is fun.
It's a wonderful life, in fact.
oh man, that's good. And the way that he performed that scene, as well as every other scene, was phenomenal. The first film was still probably better in the sense that they had an innocent child say a bunch of horrific things, but they also had to find an adult actor in the third that could be just as terrifying, and I think Dourif was a really good contender for that. Do I have any negatives? Well, not a ton. I think that even though I appreciated the lack of exposition, I still think exposition is needed to a degree. Also, because the author of the book directed this film this time, it had a different feel for tension. Like, for instance, the psychological thrills were very good, but the scary thrills weren't always. There's a moment where an old lady literally crawls on the ceiling, and that idea has been done in other films, and done better, because it usually has a much scarier buildup before it. In this movie, it just kind of happens. Looky there, an old lady crawling on the ceiling. Part of it is still spooky for sure, but without that buildup of suspense, and then that final reveal that something demented is crawling on the ceiling, it's just not a scary shot. But other than that, I can't really say that the film was made bad. You know, the performances were insanely good. Oscar-worthy at times, I would even say. It has a layered mystery that keeps getting crazier and crazier as the film progresses, and the reveal as to what's going on feels pretty original. At least it does to me. It has a solid connection to the first film, even though it also is a movie I'd consider works pretty darn standalone as well. And it completely ignores the second movie, thank God. All of that comes together for an unbiased score of 90%. My bias score, or simply how I felt about it overall, was also pretty high, but maybe a little bit lower than that unbiased score because I can admit that the first movie is better all around. The first is simply iconic in a way that feels special, while this just kind of feels fun to watch unfold. My bias score for The Exorcist 3 is 82%, meaning that when we combine everything together, we come to the final rating of 86%, 86 out of 100 possible stars, or an A- letter grade. Fun fact, throughout this whole month, The Exorcist 3 has been the second best made horror film, right below Silence of the Lambs, which means I think it's technically made better than the first film. But because the first is more iconic and more enjoyable to watch, the overall score for the first is still higher. This month is getting crazy. Join me tomorrow for my review of Candyman 2. And until then, guys, let me know your thoughts on Exorcist 3 in the comment section down below. And as for YouTube, you guys know what to do. Hit that like, subscribe button, and bell to be notified when I come out with my next review. And until then, peace out!
Dave examines movies we just watch for fun. Davey is the expert. He is the #1 critic that I go to when I need a movie.